Hello students. In the last presentation, I have discussed the psychodynamic approach, behavioral approach, and a cultural approach. I hope you all have understood. So today in this presentation, I will be covering humanistic approach, then moving on to the assessment of personality, self-report measure, MMPI, Eysenck self-report, 16PF test, advantages and disadvantages of assessment of personality. So these are the topics which I will discuss today. The humanistic approach. So this approach is basically given by Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. These two psychologists were working on principles of human growth and trying to understand a very positive aspect of human personality. And unlike Freud, they talked about and emphasized on growth-oriented principles. Now let's look at their theory. So the basic premise of this theory, according to Carl Rogers, is fully functioning person. It indicates a motivating force for personality development where people try to express their potential, their capability, and their talent to the fullest extent possible. And same concept was talked by Abraham Maslow as self-actualizing person, starting from basic physiological approach, fulfilling the basic physical needs, and then moving on to growth related concept of self-actualization. Now here, Roger makes two basic assumptions about human behavior. One is that behavior is goal directed and worthwhile. The second is that people will almost always choose adaptive, self-actualizing behavior. Now, with that, Carl Rogers observed that each person has a concept of true self or the real self and an ideal self about himself or herself. Now, here, real self is something that actual me is there, my own self concept. Okay, and the ideal self is the outside experience, something that is influenced by people around me. Suppose I believe that I am a very honest person. Outside, I'm given a message that you are not working in a sincere manner. So, in this case, there will be a clash between the real me, what I think I am, that is the self concept that I have about myself, and the outside me, which is the ideal self or the experience. So, the more the two concepts overlap, the better is the human adjustment, according to Carl Rogers. Okay, so more adjustment, congruence, balance in personality is basically determined by the closer the two concepts of real me and the ideal me are, or self concept and experience are. So, what I think about myself and what others tell me about me should be same. It should have same value. But if the concept that I hold is not matching with what others are telling me about myself, then there comes a clash in that self concept. Okay, so as per Rogers' principle, people have a tendency to maximize self concept through self actualization, and personality development is a journey towards that, is a continuous process. Now we have come to understand about true self or the real self and the ideal self. Then there is a concept known as self esteem and society, where, according to Carl Rogers, what he explained is that if society gives me a positive feedback, that is, if other people around me are positive towards me, accept me the way I am, I will have a higher self esteem. But when a person is not accepted, given a lot of embarrassment, rejections, the self esteem will be low over there. So, this is the relation between society and self. Here on the slide you can see when social conditions are positive, the self-concept and self-esteem are high. And in contrast, when the conditions are negative, the self-concept and self-esteem are low. So people with high self-concept and self-esteem are generally flexible and open to new experiences so that they can continue to grow and self-actualize. And his situation warrants that an atmosphere of unconditional positive regard must be created in order to ensure enhancement of people's self-concept. Okay. So the client-centered therapy that Rogers developed basically attempts to create this condition. That means unconditional positive regard. One must accept the other person without any conditions. Let us go through what Maslow has given under this approach, humanistic approach. So Abraham Maslow has given a detailed account of psychologically healthy people in terms of their attainment of self-actualization, which is a state in which people have reached their own fullest potential. This we have got in class 11 also, if you remember. We have that hierarchy of needs given by Maslow when we were studying motivation, isn't it? So there example has been given of that Mahatma Gandhi, whose highest potential was that of non-violence. Okay, so Maslow had an optimistic and positive view of man who has the potentialities for love, joy, and to do creative work. And human beings are considered free to shape their lives and to self-actualize. So self-actualization becomes possible by analyzing the motivations that govern our life. We know that biological security and belongingness needs, which we call as survival needs, are commonly found among animals and human beings. Yes. So an individual's sole concern with the satisfaction of these needs reduce her or him to the level of animals. The real journey of human life begins with the pursuit of self-esteem and self-actualization needs. So the humanistic approach emphasizes the significance of positive aspects of life. Okay. So while doing the humanistic approach, we got a concept known as healthy person. Now, who is a healthy person? The humanistic theory suggests that no one can be a healthy person by mere adjusting to the society. So, if you are just adjusting to the society, that doesn't mean that you are a healthy person. Okay. So, to become a healthy person, it involves the following characteristics. It involves awareness of self, that is, your feelings and the limits and accept themselves. There is experience, here and now, that is mindfulness. One should not be trapped in the past. You should always be present in the current situation, which is why experiences of here and now, that is mindfulness, is there in order to become a healthy person. And third, there is don't live in the past or dwell in the future through anxious expectations and distorted defenses. That means one should not have any anxious expectations. And then we have gone through the defense mechanisms. Yes. So here, according to the humanistic approach, we should not dwell in some distorted defense mechanisms. We should be very well organized in using those defenses. Okay. So these are the three characteristics that suggests that what a healthy person should be like. Okay, so basically it involves a quest to know oneself deeply and to be true to one's own feelings without any disguise. That means whatever you are feeling, it should be true to yourself. You should not disguise yourself to be somebody else. Now, if I am a teacher, right? Your psychology teacher. My name is Chanika. Now, here, if I disguise myself to be someone else, if I tell myself to be Narendra Modi, or if I tell myself to be Mother Teresa, of course, I'm not in my full sane, isn't it? I'm disguising myself, which is, of course, it will not say that I'm a healthy person. Yes? And also, to be oneself in the here and now. That means at present. Okay? Now let us move on to the personality assessment. Assessment refers to the procedures used to evaluate or differentiate people on the basis of certain characteristics. Okay, so personality assessment is basically where we try to understand the concept of assessment that basically predict human behavior by measuring through the use of these methods. There are certain methods which we will be discussing. Okay, and if we go through the definition, it means a formal process aimed at understanding personality of an individual with minimum error and maximum accuracy. That is termed as personality assessment. Okay, now we should also know the uses of personality assessment, which is very important. So use of personality assessment, it helps us to understand how an individual is likely to behave in a given situation. With accurate assessment, it is useful for diagnosis, training, placement, and counseling. Now, what are the techniques? The techniques, many psychologists have tried to assess personality in various ways. So these are the most commonly used techniques. Okay, those are psychometric test, self-report measures, projective techniques, and behavioral analysis. So these techniques are rooted in different theoretical orientations. Therefore, they throw light on different aspects of personality. Okay, and we have read about the psychometric test in the earlier chapter. That means in chapter 1, we have already done the psychometric test. So you can go through chapter 1 for the psychometric tests. Okay. Here we will be doing the self-report measures, projective techniques, and behavioral analysis. So the first one is the self-report measures. So it was Alport who suggested that the best method to assess a person is by asking him or her about himself or herself. So this led to the use of self-report measures, and it is basically a paper pen test. Okay, and these are very much structured. So these are the structured measures in which subjects are made to objectively report verbal responses using a rating scale. And the method requires the subject to objectively report her or his own feelings with respect to various items. Items here means the use of questions. Okay, and the responses are accepted at their face value, and they are scored in quantitative terms and interpreted on the basis of norms developed for the test. So when we say quantitative, so proper quantitative scoring is done over here and a score is obtained. So for example, personality. I'm trying to measure a variable or a component of extrovert versus introvert. Okay, so somebody who is socially outgoing and the other person who is within themselves, that I want to measure. So the extrovert, suppose a person gets a score or value of 9, is considered to be very extrovert, and the other value is for the introvert. So that is what the numbers are depicted here. And objectivity is structured the stimuli, that I am measuring the stimuli, that is in the form of questions I am asking about yourself. Okay, and this self-report measures are based on trait approaches. Okay, so the first one, under the self-report measures, there are various inventories and tests. Okay, and the self-report measures are basically known as inventories, the paper pencil test. So the first one is the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, that is MMPI, and it was developed by Hathaway and McKinley as a helping tool for psychiatric diagnosis, but later applied for identifying varieties of psychopathology. Okay, and its revised version is available as MMPI 2. Now this MMPI, that is Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, is to assess and diagnose mental disorders. So not just for personality assessment, it's so comprehensive that it measures a person on 10 scales. The 10 scales here, because 8 scales are normal mental illnesses and 2 scales are for normal personality. For example, introvert, extrovert, masculine and feminine. Okay, and it is again basically contains of a checklist of true or false answers. Now here it consists of 567 statements, and the test, as I said, is divided on 10 scales which have 10 subscales basically, and it's seek to diagnose factors like depression and mania. Mania means the opposite of depression, where a person is always in a very happy mood, always excited, always in an elevated mode of happiness. Okay, so that one. Apart from that, there are certain other terms also which you all might get confused or might not know also, but just there are the names. You don't have to know it in details. So just for the sake of the names, you can go through. The names are hypochondriasis, depression, hysteria, psychopathic deviate, masculinity, femininity, paranoia, psychasthenia, schizophrenia, mania, and social introversion. So this is very useful. Even today also people use this MMPI in order to assess any psychological disorders and also for the personality check too. Now this version has been developed in India too by two psychologists, Malik and Joshi, and they named it as Jodhpur Multiphasic Personality Inventory, that is JMPI, same along with the lines of MMPI. Only difference was that in MMPI it has around near about 600 items or statements, that is it had a total of 567 statements, whereas in JMPI, that is Jodhpur Multiphasic Personality Inventory, which is an Indian adaptation, it has 100 items. Moving on to the Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, EPQ. This is another self-report measure, again paper pen test. So it was developed by Eysenck, H.J. Eysenck, and this test initially assessed two dimensions of personality. Okay, that was introvert and extrovert, and emotionally stable and emotionally unstable. These dimensions are characterized by 32 personality traits. And later on, Eysenck added a third dimension called psychoticism. The psychoticism, it is linked to psychopathology that represents a lack of feeling for others a tendency to defy social conventions. So basically, it talked about people who are antisocial, not having a conscience, rude to others, unhuman people. Such people are psychotic by nature. Okay, so a person scoring high on these dimensions tends to be hostile, egocentric, and antisocial, like I said. Next, it is 16 personality factor questionnaire 16 PF, which I have already discussed with you people when I was doing the trade approach, right? So this was developed by Raymond Bernard Cattell, or simply you can write Cattell, and he identified a large set of personality descriptors which were subjected to factor analysis to identify the basic personality structure. Now, this test provides with declarative statements and the subject responds to a specific situation by choosing from a set of given alternatives. Okay, and the test can be used with high school level students as well as with adults, and it has been found extremely useful in career guidance, vocational exploration, and occupational testing. Now let's see some of the uses of self-report test. It is used for career guidance, vocational exploration, and occupational testing for students or adults. It is also used to assess specific dimensions of personality type. For example, authoritarianism, locus of control, optimism. What is the type of this personality? That is being assessed through the self-report test. With the uses, advantages, there are also certain limitations of self-report tests. Okay. The first limitation is of social desirability. What is social desirability? It is a tendency on the part of the respondent to endorse items in a socially desirable manner. So we know now that it is a paper pen test, and basically it has statements where you already have options and you have to choose or strike out the options which is applicable to you. Now when answering or giving your response to any statement, first of all there is a fact called social desirability, where you think first that what others will think about you, what the society will think about you if you respond it in this way. After your response, how others will accept you. These are some of the things which comes to the mind of the respondent. And from that point of view, what the respondent does is that he or she will think before giving the response that what the society desires, what the examiner wants from the respondent, and accordingly he or she, the respondent, will give his or her response, which is not true because there is this limitation of social desirability. Okay, so they will respond according to the fact that if others will accept or not. Next, it is acquiescence. Acquiescence is another limitation, or we can say it is also a problem when we conduct tests using self-report measures. So acquiescence, it is a tendency of the subject or the respondent to agree with items or questions irrespective of their contents. So it is a tendency of the subject of saying yes to items irrespective of the content, which makes it less reliable for an effective outcome. Okay, so this tendencies render the assessment of personality less reliable because they often have the tendency of responding yes to each and every item, whether it is applicable or not. There are some people or respondents who do not go through the answers, and in every block, in every statements, they're opting for yes. Are you having low mood? Yes. Are you having high mood? Yes. So in that case, of course, it is not reliable uh, to evaluate the outcome, isn't it? So that is what is acquiescence. It is a tendency of the subject of saying yes to items irrespective of the content. And lastly, there is another problem or limitation, that is hesitant to open. So this being a direct method where assessment is based on the information directly from the subject, hence he or she knows that he or she is being assessed for personality and gets self-conscious and hesitates to share his or her private feelings. Now, hesitant to open, yes, many times people do have this issue that they don't feel like opening up to any stranger. Of course, the person who is testing him or her is a total stranger, isn't it? So why the other person will open up? So in that case, again, there is this issue that they will feel shy, embarrassed, and so on in order to report the exact feeling, report the exact fact about his or her own personality. Okay, so it is very necessary to have a sound note of caution at this stage. Now remember that psychological testing and understanding personality requires great skill and training. Unless you have acquired this to an optimum level under careful supervision of an expert, you should not venture into testing and interpreting the personality of your friends who do not study psychology. Okay, so with this, today we have covered the humanistic approach, we have covered personality assessment, under which we have done self report measures, then we have done MMPI, EPQ, and 16PF, as well as we have gone through the limitations of self report measures as well. Okay, thank you.